Chapter 1. The Foundations of Our Nature. Imagine standing in the center of a bustling market in a city you have never visited, surrounded by a language you do not speak, immersed in customs you do not understand. The clothing is different, the architecture is unfamiliar, and the food bears no resemblance to anything you have ever tasted. You might feel entirely alienated, as if you have stepped onto another planet. But then, across the crowded square, you lock eyes with a mother who is tossing her toddler into the air. The child erupts into a fit of breathless laughter, and the mother's face breaks into a wide, radiant smile. In that fraction of a second, the distance between your culture and hers vanishes entirely. You know exactly what she is feeling. You understand the warmth in her chest, the protective, fierce devotion, the pure, unadulterated joy. You understand it because, beneath the colorful and varied tapestries of human culture, there lies a bedrock of shared psychological design. Just as a paramedic anywhere in the world knows exactly where to place a stethoscope to hear the rhythmic beating of a human heart, we can navigate the human experience knowing that our emotional and psychological anatomy is universal. The physical heart is a marvel of evolutionary engineering designed over eons to pump blood through our veins, but our minds are equally engineered. We possess a universal human nature. We all know what it means to feel the sharp sting of envy, the warm glow of trust, the paralyzing grip of fear, and the undeniable pull of desire. These are not inventions of society, nor are they arbitrary cultural artifacts. They are the deeply ingrained survival tools of a species that has spent millions of years navigating a complex, dangerous, and beautiful world. To understand why we are the way we are, we must confront a truth that is both humbling and profoundly empowering. We are the architects of our cultures, but we are the products of our evolution. And the engine of that evolution is not merely survival. Survival is, of course, a prerequisite for success, but it is not the ultimate goal. Imagine an individual living thousands of years ago who was blessed with absolute physical perfection. Imagine they were immune to all disease, faster than any predator, and brilliant enough to outsmart any rival. Imagine this magnificent individual lived in perfect health for over a century. But now, imagine they never found a mate, never formed a bond, and never had a child. When their long life finally came to an end, every ounce of their brilliance, every genetic advantage they possessed, vanished from the earth forever. They left no legacy. Nature is a harsh and uncompromising auditor, and the only currency it accepts for entry into the future is reproduction. Everything we are, our capacity for language, our drive for success, our ability to cooperate, and our desperate need for connection, was shaped by ancestors who successfully passed their blueprints on to the next generation. We inherited the tendencies that helped them achieve that ultimate goal. This does not reduce our complex lives, our art, our music, and our triumphs to mere biological mechanics. Rather, it elevates them. It means that our passions and our intellects are the very instruments that allowed our ancestors to thrive against impossible odds. Many deeply compassionate people resist this idea. They prefer to believe that human beings arrive in this world as entirely blank slates ready to be written upon by society and culture. They fear that acknowledging a biological human nature implies that we are mindless robots bound by our instincts or that our flaws are unchangeable. But this is a fundamental misunderstanding of how our nature works. Evolution did not hand us a rigid script to act out. It handed us a remarkably flexible toolkit. It gave us free will, conscious thought, and the ability to learn precisely because the world is unpredictable. Free will is an evolutionary masterpiece designed to help us adapt, to calculate the consequences of our actions, and to outmaneuver our challenges. It is the ultimate adaptive strategy. We are not slaves to our biology. Our biology is what gives us our freedom. Consider how this legacy is passed down. For generations, people believed that the experiences and physical changes a person accumulated over their lifetime were passed directly to their children. But the reality is far more elegant and protective. Think of a master carpenter who has spent a lifetime learning his trade, building incredible structures, but who tragically loses a hand in an accident. When he subsequently has a child, that child is not born missing a hand, nor is the child born knowing how to build a cabinet. The genetic blueprint is kept pristine, locked away in a safe, entirely separate from the wear and tear of the carpenter's physical life. We are the vehicles for this ancient, enduring code. Our task is to carry it forward, to protect it, and to combine it with another. This brings us to the most beautiful paradox of human existence. If we all share this universal human nature, if the blueprint is standard across the globe, why is every single person on this earth so entirely, breathtakingly unique? How can we be so universally the same, yet so deeply individual? You are not a carbon copy of your mother, nor are you a clone of your father. You are a completely original masterpiece, never seen before in the history of the universe and never to be seen again. Even your closest siblings are distinct from you in temperament, in talent, and in perspective. This staggering individuality is the direct result of the most powerful, disruptive, and creative force in the natural world, the mixing of two distinct genetic lineages. Every time a new life is formed, the ancient code is not just duplicated, it is shuffled, halved, and woven together with another lineage to create a novel combination. It is like taking two distinct symphonies, deconstructing them into their individual notes, and weaving them together to compose a piece of music that has never been played before. This constant, relentless shuffling prevents us from ever becoming too uniform, while simultaneously ensuring that no one strays too far from the universal human baseline. We are all bound together by the same fundamental sheet music, yet every one of us plays a unique song. But why go through this immensely complicated, risky, and inefficient process? Why rely on the unpredictable merging of two individuals to create the future? If you have survived, if your traits have proven successful, why not simply duplicate yourself and be done with it? The necessity of finding a partner, of compromise, of competing for affection, and of blending our carefully honed traits with someone else's seems like a massive, unnecessary vulnerability. Why do we need another person to complete the bridge to the future? The answer to that question is a mystery that has baffled the greatest minds for centuries, and discovering the truth will completely shatter the way you view the world around you. Chapter 2. The Biological Paradox. Imagine you are a brilliant efficiency expert, hired to design the perfect, most streamlined method for a biological organism to expand its population and dominate its environment. You would look at the available options and immediately conclude that the organism should simply duplicate itself. Every single individual would be a self-contained factory, capable of producing identical copies. You would never, in your wildest dreams, invent a system where half the population is entirely incapable of bearing children. You would never invent a system where two individuals must spend vast amounts of time, energy, and resources just to locate one another, impress one another, and combine their materials to produce a single offspring. From a purely logical standpoint, the way we reproduce is an absolute disaster. It is incredibly wasteful. Yet here we are, participating in this deeply inefficient dance. To truly feel the weight of this paradox, let us visualize a lush, isolated valley untouched by the outside world. In this valley live two distinct tribes of people. The first tribe reproduces exactly as we do. It takes a man and a woman to create a child. The second tribe is entirely female. Through some biological quirk, these women do not need partners. They can spontaneously give birth to daughters who are identical genetic copies of themselves. Let us watch what happens over just a few generations. In the first generation, the sexual tribe has 100 members, 50 men and 50 women. If each woman has 2 children, the population remains stable at 100. Meanwhile, the cloning tribe also starts with 100 members, all women. If each of them has 2 children, their population instantly booms to 200. In the next generation, the sexual tribe's 50 women again produce 100 children. But the cloning tribe now has 200 women who produce 400 children. Within a blink of evolutionary time, the cloning tribe will completely overrun the valley. The sexual tribe will be squeezed out of existence, unable to compete for food, shelter, and resources. The cloning tribe wins because every single member of its society is a baby producer. The sexual tribe is fundamentally crippled by the fact that 50% of its population, the men, cannot bear children. This is the monumental cost of our biological design. We are throwing away half of our reproductive potential. Add to this the staggering costs of courtship, the time wasted seeking a partner, the dangerous rivalries, the vulnerability to predators while distracted by romance, and the biological risk of mixing your proven successful genes with the untested genes of a stranger. When you weigh all of these heavy burdens, the existence of our mating system stops looking like a beautiful miracle and starts looking like a glaring mathematical error. Why would nature ever permit such a costly system to survive? For a long time, the accepted wisdom was that we mix our genes to create variety, and that this variety is essential for the long-term survival of the species. The idea was that by shuffling the genetic deck in every generation, a species could invent new traits, adapt to changing climates, and slowly march up the ladder of progress. It sounds noble and comforting to imagine that we endure the costs of our biology for the greater good of our descendants. But this beautifully cooperative view of nature harbors a fatal flaw. Nature does not possess foresight. Evolution is not a conscious designer sitting at a drafting table, planning for the next millennium. It is a blind, immediate, and ruthless process that rewards only one thing: whoever is leaving the most surviving offspring right now. Imagine two runners fleeing from a dangerous predator. One runner does not need to be faster than the predator to survive. He only needs to be faster than the other runner. The struggle for existence is almost always a fierce competition against our own kind. Therefore, if a genetic shortcut arises, like the ability to clone oneself and instantly double your reproductive output, that shortcut will spread like wildfire. A trait that guarantees immediate dominance will never sacrifice itself for the vague, long-term benefit of the species. The immediate advantage always wins. Since the immediate advantage of cloning is so overwhelmingly powerful, the benefits of mixing our genes must be equally immediate and overwhelmingly powerful. The payoff cannot be a million years in the future. It must be happening right now, in every single generation, to offset the massive cost of males. One compelling angle to consider is the fragility of information. Imagine you have a pristine master copy of a highly complex document. You run it through a photocopier. Then you take that copy and run it through the machine again. If you repeat this process 1,000 times, copying the copy of the copy, the final document will be a blurred, unreadable mess. Every time a copy is made, tiny errors, specks of dust, and smudges are introduced. Because you lost the master copy, those errors are permanently locked in, and new errors are piled on top of them. This is the terrifying reality for any organism that reproduces by cloning. Every genetic mutation, every biological typo is passed on to the next generation, forever. The errors accumulate silently and relentlessly. The only way to get rid of a fatal smudge is for the individual carrying it to die without reproducing. But when we mix our genes with a partner, we are doing something miraculous. We are checking our heavily copied document against someone else's. We take half of our pages and half of theirs, allowing the fresh, error-free sections to replace the smudged ones. We are constantly purging the accumulated errors, holding back the inevitable tide of genetic decay. This molecular maintenance is vital, but is it enough? Is the slow accumulation of typos truly terrifying enough to justify the staggering inefficiency of finding a mate? Many deeply experienced minds have looked at the math and concluded that it still falls short. The cost of throwing away half our reproductive power is just too steep to be explained by mere proofreading. There must be a more urgent, immediate threat. We are not just shuffling the deck to clear out mistakes. We are shuffling the deck because if we hold the same hand of cards for too long, an opponent is going to figure out our strategy and destroy us. To understand why we endure the paradox of our biology, we must look away from our own genes and look out into the world, toward an invisible, relentless enemy that is breathing down our necks at this very moment. Chapter 3. The Evolutionary Treadmill. We are raised on a comforting illusion about the nature of life. We are taught to view the history of our world as a grand, ascending ladder of progress. We imagine our distant ancestors huddled in cold caves, struggling against the harsh elements, slowly inventing better tools, growing thicker skins, and mastering the brutal forces of wind, ice, and fire. We look at the magnificent thick fur of a polar bear or the water-retaining hump of a camel and we marvel at how perfectly life adapts to the physical environment. It feels like a triumphant march toward perfection, a steady climb out of the mud and into the light. But this vision of life as a ladder is fundamentally flawed. Evolution is not a ladder, it is a treadmill. And no matter how fast you run, you never actually get anywhere. You only manage to avoid being thrown off the back. To understand the true nature of this treadmill, we have to stop looking at the physical world as our primary obstacle. The biting frost of winter and the scorching heat of a drought are certainly dangerous, but they are relatively static. The cold does not actively scheme to become colder just because you grew a thicker coat of fur. The physical environment is blind and indifferent, but life is not indifferent. The most formidable, deadly, and relentless threats to any living creature are other living creatures. The true struggle for existence is a zero-sum game played against living, breathing enemies that fight back, adapt, and learn. When we think of biological enemies, we usually picture the terrifying jaws of a predator, the lion stalking through the tall grass, or the shark circling in the deep. But predators are only a small part of the story. The real masters of the evolutionary treadmill are entirely invisible. They are the parasites, the viruses, and the bacteria. They are the microscopic invaders that seek to breach the walls of your cells, hijack your biological machinery, and drain your resources to multiply themselves. They are the ultimate, intimate enemies, and they possess one terrifying advantage: time. A human generation lasts roughly 3 decades. In that same span of time, a bacterium can pass through hundreds of thousands of generations. While we take a single, slow evolutionary step, our microscopic enemies have run a marathon of adaptation, constantly mutating and inventing new ways to break into our bodies. Imagine a legendary locksmith tasked with defending a walled city. He spends his entire life designing a masterpiece, a lock so complex, so perfectly engineered that no thief in the land can pick it. For a lifetime, the city is completely safe. The citizens prosper in peace, and the locksmith is hailed as a genius. When he grows old, he decides to leave his masterpiece to his child, confident that he is passing down the ultimate defense. He gives his child the exact blueprints, the exact materials, and the exact design, thinking he has guaranteed their safety forever. But the locksmith has made a fatal miscalculation. During the decades of his peaceful reign, the thieves outside the city walls did not simply give up and go home. They camped at the gates. They ran their fingers over the metal, they listened to the internal clicks of the mechanism, and they built thousands of their own crude keys, testing them night after night. They failed over and over again, but every failure taught them something new. By the time the locksmith's child takes over the city, the thieves have finally forged the perfect key. If the child relies on the father's perfect lock, the city will be sacked on the very first night. To survive, the child cannot use the father's brilliant, proven design. The child must melt down the locks, throw away the blueprints, and build a completely new mechanism. The new lock might even be objectively less elegant or less sturdy than the father's masterpiece. It does not matter. The only thing that matters is that the new lock is different. Its entire value lies in its novelty, in the simple fact that the thieves have never seen it before. This is the desperate, never-ending siege that your immune system fights every single second of your life. The viruses and bacteria are the thieves at the gates, constantly forging new molecular keys to slip past your defenses. If you were to reproduce by simply cloning yourself, passing down your exact genetic blueprint, you would be handing your children a fortress with compromised locks. The parasites that spent your lifetime learning how to break into your cells would instantly know how to break into your children's cells. Your offspring would be sitting ducks, wiped out by the exact same plagues that you only barely managed to survive. This is why we endure the massive, seemingly irrational costs of finding a mate. By mixing our genetic code with a partner, we are scrambling the blueprints. We are gathering the biological locks that worked for us, tossing them into a furnace with the locks of our partner, and forging an entirely new, untested set of defenses for our children. We are ensuring that our offspring are a moving target. Our romantic passions, our fierce biological drive to connect, and the very existence of 2 distinct genders are not just poetic aspects of the human condition. They are tactical maneuvers in a microscopic, eternal war. We are forced to constantly shuffle our genetic deck, abandoning the very traits that kept us alive yesterday just to maintain a fighting chance for tomorrow. We must constantly change, constantly reinvent our internal architecture, not to achieve some glorious state of higher perfection, but simply to hold our ground. We are running as fast as we possibly can, generation after generation, just to stay in the exact same place.
Chapter 4. The Internal Rebellion. When you look in the mirror, you see a single, unified being. You feel like one cohesive entity, possessing one mind, one body, and one set of goals. You wake up, you pursue your ambitions, and you seek happiness as a singular I. But this feeling of absolute unity is a masterful illusion. Beneath the surface of your skin, you are not a single individual at all. You are a vast, bustling, microscopic metropolis. Inside your cells, there are tens of thousands of different genes, and just like the citizens of any sprawling city, they have formed a complex society to build and operate the magnificent machine that is your body. And just like any human society, this genetic metropolis is suspended in a delicate, fragile balance between profound cooperation and ruthless, selfish ambition. To understand the hidden turmoil inside us, imagine a small, deeply traditional farming village situated around a beautiful, lush green pasture. For generations, the village has operated on a system of pure trust. The pasture is a common ground, and every family is allowed to graze their cattle there. Because the villagers understand that their survival depends on the health of the grass, they each keep only a few cows, ensuring the land is never depleted. The system works perfectly. The village thrives because the collective good is prioritized, but human nature is complex, and one night, a single farmer looks out at the common pasture and makes a quiet, calculating decision. He realizes that if he sneaks just 3 extra cows onto the grass, he alone will reap the financial reward of the extra milk and meat, while the cost, the slight overgrazing of the land, will be divided equally among everyone in the village. He acts on this realization and he prospers. Soon, his neighbor notices his newly acquired wealth and does the same. Within a very short time, every farmer is maximizing their own herd. The grass is eaten down to the dirt, the cattle starve, and the entire village collapses into ruin. The pursuit of individual advantage has destroyed the collective community. This is the classic tragedy of the commons, and it is the exact same threat that constantly menaces our genetic code. Our genes must cooperate to build a functioning body so that they can be passed on to the next generation. But within this grand cooperative venture, there are rogue elements. There are genes that operate like that selfish farmer. When a man or a woman's body begins the intricate process of creating sperm or eggs, the genetic pairs inherited from their own mother and father are supposed to divide fairly, leaving the outcome to a 50-50 biological coin toss. But some mutinous genes refuse to play by the rules. Instead of accepting the fair toss of the coin, they deploy biological weapons. They literally release chemical enzymes to assassinate their opposing partner gene, guaranteeing that they alone will dominate the sperm or the egg. If these microscopic murderers were allowed to operate unchecked, the genetic society would tear itself apart and the organism would fail to reproduce. To survive this internal rebellion, the Society of Genes had to establish laws and deploy a police force. Just as a civilization creates a justice system to prevent society from descending into chaos, our cells evolved mechanisms to enforce fairness. Before the genes divide, the chromosomes physically tangle together and swap massive chunks of information. This rapid, complex shuffling acts as a profound equalizer, disarming the rogue genes by constantly moving them away from their targets and stripping them of their weapons. The cooperation of the human body is not a state of peaceful harmony. It is a heavily policed truce, maintained by biological laws that suppress the selfish ambitions of individual genes for the good of the whole. But there was one ancient mutiny so severe, so fundamentally catastrophic, that simple policing could not solve it. To resolve this specific crisis, life had to invent an entirely new architectural blueprint for reproduction. It had to invent the concept of 2 separate genders. To grasp the magnitude of this crisis, we must look at a different part of the cell. Outside the nucleus, floating in the fluid of our cells, are tiny, vital power plants called mitochondria. These microscopic engines generate the energy we need to live, and they possess their own distinct set of DNA, separate from the main genetic vault. Millions of years ago, when early forms of life attempted to merge and reproduce, a devastating problem arose. If 2 merging cells both brought their own power plants into the new union, those power plants did not cooperate. Like 2 heavily armed rival royal guards suddenly forced to occupy the same castle, they viewed each other as mortal enemies. They engaged in a microscopic war to the death, slaughtering each other to gain total control of the new cell. This internal warfare was so toxic and so destructive that it often killed the newly formed offspring entirely. Evolution faced a monumental roadblock. How do you mix the genes of 2 individuals without sparking a deadly war between their power plants? The solution was a masterpiece of biological bureaucracy, a grand treaty that forever altered the course of life on Earth.
One partner had to agree to disarm completely. One side of the reproductive partnership evolved to become the ultimate safe harbor. This partner would provide a massive, stationary vessel, the egg, packed with nutrients, protective fluids, and a full, healthy fleet of power plants. The other partner evolved to become a traveling minimalist. To guarantee that no internal war would break out, this partner agreed to strip its reproductive vehicle of almost everything. It would discard its own power plants, shed all its excess cellular baggage, and become a tiny, highly mobile delivery system, the sperm, carrying absolutely nothing but a tightly packed vault of DNA. The sperm is granted entry only because it arrives completely unarmed, ensuring that when the two cells fuse, there is no rival army to challenge the egg's power plants. This incredible evolutionary treaty is the origin of the two genders. The female is the gender that produces the large, resource-rich, stationary egg. The male is the gender that produces the small, stripped-down, mobile sperm. We are not male and female because of some arbitrary cosmic design. We are male and female because eons ago it was the only way to prevent our internal components from destroying our children. Gender is a breathtakingly elegant solution to an ancient cellular civil war. Understanding this profound biological asymmetry, the massive investment of the large egg versus the minimal, stripped-down investment of the small sperm, changes everything. It sets the stage for the most complex, beautiful, and sometimes tragic interactions in the human experience. Because once life solved the problem of how to safely combine, it immediately faced a new, even more daunting challenge. If one partner is investing enormous resources and the other is traveling light, how do they decide who to partner with? The treaty was signed, but the intricate, high-stakes game of seduction was just about to begin. Chapter 5. The Currency of Seduction. Imagine a sprawling ancient forest where survival is a daily, grueling test of endurance. In this unforgiving environment, every creature is camouflaged, cloaked in muted browns and greens to hide from the sharp eyes of predators. Every ounce of energy is conserved for the vital tasks of hunting, foraging, and escaping danger. But suddenly, into a sunlit clearing, steps a creature that shatters every logical rule of survival. He is adorned in blinding, iridescent colors, shimmering blues, radiant golds, and piercing crimson. Trailing behind him is an enormous, heavy curtain of feathers, so long and cumbersome that he can barely fly. He is a walking beacon to every predator in the forest, and he is expending a massive amount of physical energy just to drag his ornate wardrobe across the forest floor. To any rational observer, this creature is an evolutionary disaster, a walking target who should have been wiped out of existence generations ago. Yet there he stands, magnificent and alive. Why would nature, which is so utterly ruthless about efficiency and survival, tolerate such a dangerous, wasteful display? The answer lies in the intense, high-stakes arena of sexual selection, a force that often operates in direct defiance of mere survival. While natural selection is about living long enough to breed, sexual selection is about convincing someone to breed with you. And in this specific arena, the rules of the game change entirely. The vibrant, heavy, dangerous ornament is not a mistake. It is a highly calculated currency of seduction. To understand this currency, we must return to the biological treaty we explored in the previous chapter. The massive investment of the female egg versus the minimal investment of the male sperm. Because females invest an enormous amount of time, energy, and bodily resources into a single offspring, they must be exceptionally careful about whose genetic material they allow to fertilize that egg. They are the ultimate biological buyers, seeking the highest possible quality. Males, on the other hand, produce millions of cheap, mobile sperm, meaning their most effective strategy is often to seek out as many partners as possible. They are the ultimate biological salesmen, driven to advertise, persuade, and sometimes deceive in order to close the deal. This dynamic creates a profound conflict of interest. The female wants the absolute truth about the male's health, his strength, and his genetic quality. The male, driven by the urge to reproduce, is entirely willing to exaggerate, disguise his flaws, and present himself as far more robust than he actually is. If a male could fake his way into a female's good graces by merely whispering a sweet, cost-free song, the world would be full of weak, sickly males successfully passing on their inferior genes. The female needs a foolproof way to cut through the marketing and force the male to prove his true worth. This is where the concept of the biological handicap comes into play, a concept that completely flips our understanding of weakness and strength. Imagine two athletes preparing for a grueling, high-stakes marathon. One athlete arrives at the starting line wearing lightweight aerodynamic gear. The other athlete arrives wearing a heavy, cumbersome backpack filled with stones. The starting gun fires, and the race begins. If the athlete carrying the heavy backpack manages to not only finish the race but actually cross the finish line in first place, what do you immediately know about him? You know, without a shadow of a doubt, that his underlying physical fitness, his cardiovascular health, and his muscular strength are vastly superior to the rest of the field. He did not win because of the backpack. He won despite it. The heavy, burdensome backpack is the absolute unfakeable proof of his hidden internal quality. In the natural world, beautiful, heavy, and dangerous ornaments serve the exact same function as that backpack. When a female looks at a male dragging an enormous brightly colored tail through a forest, she is not merely admiring the aesthetics. She is looking at a living, breathing medical certificate. She knows that to grow such a magnificent structure, the male must have been exceptionally well fed during his development, indicating superior foraging skills. She knows that to maintain the vibrant colors and pristine symmetry of the ornament, he must be completely free of internal parasites and debilitating diseases. And most importantly, she knows that he has managed to survive the constant threat of predators while carrying a massive, glowing target on his back. The beauty of the ornament is an honest signal precisely because it is so incredibly costly to maintain. A weak, sickly male simply could not bear the burden of such a handicap without perishing. But this pursuit of honest quality is not the only force that drives the evolution of extreme beauty. Sometimes, seduction is driven by the sheer, overwhelming power of arbitrary fashion. Imagine a high society culture where, for some forgotten historical reason, it becomes incredibly fashionable for men to wear deep purple velvet cloaks. At first, maybe the purple dye was slightly harder to find, indicating a bit of extra wealth. But very quickly the original reason is lost, and the trend takes on a life of its own. Women in this society begin to exclusively court men wearing purple cloaks. Now imagine you are a mother in this society. Even if you personally think the purple cloaks are ridiculous, heavy, and impractical, you would be a fool to forbid your son from wearing one. If you send him out into the world without the fashionable cloak, no woman will look at him, and your family's lineage will die out. So you make sure your son wears the most vibrant, elaborate purple cloak possible. Because every mother is doing the same thing, the competition escalates. The cloaks get longer, heavier, and more wildly embellished. The women, in turn, become even more discerning, demanding only the most extreme examples of the fashion. The trait and the preference for the trait become locked in a runaway cycle, accelerating generation after generation until the men are dragging suffocating, absurdly heavy velvet trains behind them everywhere they go. In the biological realm, this runaway fashion cycle explains how a simple preference can quickly spiral into the evolution of breathtaking yet completely arbitrary physical extremes. The female chooses the extreme male not because he is inherently better at surviving, but simply because she wants to guarantee that she gives birth to a sexy, fashionable son who will be able to attract females in the next generation. Yet, even in the midst of this seemingly superficial pursuit of fashion, there is a deep, microscopic war being waged. The flawless symmetry of a physical ornament and the blinding brightness of its colors are intimately tied to the male's immune system. The very hormones that trigger a male to develop these grand, aggressive displays of masculinity often have a dangerous side effect. They suppress the immune system, leaving the male highly vulnerable to microscopic invaders. Therefore, if a male can produce a breathtakingly vibrant display while simultaneously holding back the relentless tide of internal infections, he is broadcasting a genetic masterpiece. He is proving that he possesses the rare, highly coveted biological codes that can defeat the invisible enemies of his generation. By choosing him, the female is securing those elite disease-fighting codes for her children. Beauty, therefore, is never truly skin-deep. When we feel the powerful magnetic pull of attraction, we are experiencing the culmination of millions of years of ruthless evolutionary auditing. The symmetry we admire, the vitality we are drawn to, and the displays of strength and wit that captivate us are all echoes of this ancient currency of seduction. We are participating in a profound, high-stakes biological negotiation, peeling back the layers of marketing to seek the hidden, underlying truth of our partner's quality. And as we transition from the initial spark of seduction into the complex, enduring architecture of human relationships, we will find that this negotiation only deepens, revealing a fascinating, often contradictory map of our deepest desires. Chapter 6. The Mating Game. Imagine a vast, ancient city carved into the sheer face of a desert canyon, a civilization lost to the sands of time. At the very peak of this city sits the palace of the Supreme Emperor, a man whose word is absolute law. Within the high walls of his fortress, he commands a court of thousands of women, selected from across the empire for their extraordinary beauty and vitality. Beneath him, the society is structured like a grand pyramid of reproductive privilege. The high lords and generals each possess estates with hundreds of wives. The provincial governors are granted 50, the local magistrates 20, and the wealthy merchants 5. As you descend to the very bottom of the pyramid, you find the common laborers and the vast majority of the men in the empire. For them, there are no women left. They are condemned by their social standing to a life of grueling labor and absolute celibacy. If one of these men were to even look at a woman belonging to the emperor, the punishment would be the total destruction of his village and the eradication of his family line. This is not merely a dark fairy tale, it is a vivid illustration of a recurring pattern throughout human history. When men have acquired absolute, unchecked power, they have almost universally used it to monopolize the reproductive potential of women, leaving less powerful men with nothing. The connection between immense power and vast reproductive access is a long, deeply ingrained thread in the human story. It reveals a startling truth about the underlying biological drives that shape our behavior. We like to think of ourselves as entirely cultured, rational beings, completely divorced from the animal kingdom. But beneath our sophisticated philosophies and modern technologies, we carry the ancient, inherited instincts of an ape. Our minds are not blank slates. They are highly evolved instruments, equipped with deep-seated tendencies regarding romantic love, sexual jealousy, and the fierce desire to protect our lineages. To understand the complex, sometimes chaotic nature of human relationships, we must examine the ultimate biological negotiation taking place between men and women. In the grand joint venture of creating a new life, the two partners bring vastly different investments to the table. Think of it as a business partnership where one partner is asked to invest their entire life savings, their home, and their physical safety, while the other partner is asked to invest a single, easily replaceable coin. In the biological realm, a female mammal commits to an astonishingly expensive undertaking. She provides a massive, nutrient-rich egg, she risks her own health and mobility to carry a developing child inside her body for months, and she expends immense physical energy to produce milk to sustain that child after it is born. The male, by contrast, provides a microscopic contribution of genetic material and has the biological capacity to simply walk away in a matter of minutes. This profound inequality in the cost of reproduction is the gravitational force that pulls the entire mating game into motion. Because a woman invests so much of her life and bodily resources into a single child, she cannot afford to make a mistake. She stands to lose heavily if she partners with a mate who is genetically weak or who will abandon her in a harsh environment. Therefore, the female becomes the ultimate discerning buyer. She prioritizes absolute quality. She seeks the best possible genetic blueprint and the most reliable source of ongoing support. The man, however, is not constrained by the same biological limits. Because his physical investment in the conception of a child is so incredibly low, his reproductive potential is practically limitless. At the margin, he loses nothing by seeking out an additional partner, but he stands to gain the immense jackpot of another woman's lifelong investment in his child. Therefore, the male biological drive naturally leans towards seeking a high quantity of partners. This is why, across almost all cultures, and indeed across 99% of the animal kingdom, we see a universal dynamic. The males are the ardent, aggressive pursuers, and the females are the cautious, selective evaluators. It is the reason why, historically and culturally, men are typically expected to initiate courtship, to propose marriage, and to compete fiercely for female attention. The gender that invests the least must constantly prove its worth to the gender that invests the most. We can actually prove that this is a strict biological rule by looking at the rare, fascinating exceptions in nature. Imagine a species of coastal marsh bird where the typical roles are completely reversed. In this species, the female lays the eggs, but it is the male who sits on the nest, incubating the eggs for weeks and raising the vulnerable chicks. Because the males are entirely tied up with the grueling labor of child-rearing, they become the scarce, highly valuable resource. What happens to the females? They become larger, more colorful, and fiercely aggressive. The females physically battle each other for territory and relentlessly harass the coy, hesitant males, trying to secure as many partners as possible. The moment the burden of physical investment shifts, the entire psychology of seduction flips perfectly upside down. If the male biological drive leans so heavily toward building harems and acquiring multiple partners, why is modern human society predominantly monogamous? Why aren't all men fighting to become ancient emperors? The answer lies in the brilliant, calculating mathematics of survival, dictated by a concept known as game theory. Imagine a prehistoric landscape where a few giant, terrifyingly powerful men guard large groups of women. A young, lower-ranking male realizes he will never win a physical battle against the chief. He faces a lifetime of celibacy. But he attempts a radically different strategy. He finds a single female who is currently unprotected. Instead of trying to acquire more women, he stays with her. He guards her from predators, he shares the food he hunts, and he helps protect their infant child. Because this child has two dedicated, exhausted parents working round the clock to ensure its survival, it thrives. The powerful chief, meanwhile, has dozens of children, but he cannot possibly feed or protect all of them, and many perish in the harsh winter. Over generations, the strategy of the dedicated monogamous father proves to be incredibly successful. Monogamy sweeps through the population not as a moral awakening, but as a highly effective tactical maneuver by males seeking to guarantee the survival of their offspring against the neglect of the polygamists. Yet this creates a fascinating, enduring tension because females are also constantly weighing their options. Imagine a young woman in a deeply impoverished, struggling pioneer settlement. She has two suitors. One is a kind, destitute farmhand who offers absolute, undivided loyalty, but his fields are barren and he cannot guarantee she will not starve. The other suitor is a wealthy, established landowner who already has a wife but who possesses vast storehouses of grain and a heavily fortified home. The young woman faces a brutal calculation. If she chooses the poor man, she receives 100% of his resources, but 100% of nothing is still nothing. If she chooses the wealthy man, she may only receive half of his attention and half of his resources, but that half is still vastly more than the poor man can offer in total. In environments where the gap between the rich and the poor is massive, it becomes a logical, survival-based decision for a woman to choose to share a highly successful man rather than monopolize a failing one. She calculates that the fraction of wealth and security she receives as a second or third partner is a better environment for raising a child than the undivided attention of poverty. This explains why, throughout human history, extreme disparities in wealth have almost always resulted in the emergence of polygamy, often with the practical, calculated consent of the women seeking security for their children. We are left with a beautifully complex, deeply conflicted human nature. We carry the quiet, stabilizing programming for deep, monogamous pair bonding, born from the necessity of keeping our vulnerable children alive. Yet, running silently in the background, we also carry the ancient, restless drives of our ancestors. Men carry the whispering instinct for variety and quantity, a legacy of the evolutionary jackpot of the harem. Women carry the relentless, evaluating instinct for absolute quality, constantly scanning the horizon to ensure their partner remains the best possible provider and protector. Every modern romance, every marriage, and every heartbreak is a continuation of this ancient, high-stakes game. We are constantly balancing the need for security against the pull of opportunity, trying to build a stable future while navigating the powerful, invisible currents of our own biology. Chapter 7. The Architecture of the Mind. Imagine that you and a companion are navigating the labyrinthine streets of a sprawling, unfamiliar foreign city. You have left your hotel, wandered through a vibrant marketplace, crossed several winding bridges, and are now thoroughly and hopelessly lost. As the sun begins to set, the two of you must find your way back. If you observe carefully, you will often notice a profound difference in the way you and your companion attempt to solve this problem. One of you might instinctively try to mentally map the city from above, pointing and saying that the hotel must be generally to the northwest, calculating distance and trajectory in a straight, invisible line through the buildings. The other might rely on a sequential string of visual memories, looking for the bakery with the blue awning, remembering to turn left at the fountain with the broken statue, and retracing the journey through a series of vivid, relational landmarks. Both of you will eventually arrive safely back at the hotel. Neither strategy is inherently superior, but the internal algorithms running in your minds, the psychological software used to process the exact same environment, are fundamentally different. For a long time, society preferred to believe that men and women were born with identical cognitive software, and that any differences in how we think, feel, or navigate the world were entirely the result of how we were raised. We wanted to believe that the human brain was a blank slate, a perfect, genderless sponge that simply absorbed the expectations of culture. But this belief ignores the most powerful force in the natural world. If the relentless pressures of evolution were strong enough to shape the physical differences between male and female bodies, and if the brutal calculus of survival was strong enough to shape our divergent mating strategies, it is physically impossible that evolution simply stopped at the neck. The human brain is the most expensive, complex, and vital organ we possess. It is the very engine of our survival. And just as male and female bodies faced different challenges over millions of years, the male and female mind faced different evolutionary hurdles. To understand the architecture of our minds, we must journey back into the deep ancestral past, long before the invention of cities, agriculture, or written language. For the vast majority of human history, we lived as nomadic foragers. In this ancient, unforgiving environment, survival required an intense division of labor. Because women were the ones who carried, birthed, and nursed children, they were tethered to the social core of the tribe. Their survival, and the survival of their infants, depended entirely on their ability to master the immediate, complex environment around the camp. This was not a passive existence. It was an incredibly demanding cognitive challenge. Imagine an ancestral mother stepping out into the wild to gather sustenance. She had to memorize a vast, infinitely detailed, and constantly changing botanical map. She needed to remember exactly which patch of forest had the root that cured a fever, which tree bore fruit in the late summer, and which berries were poisonous lookalikes. She navigated not by calculating geometric coordinates, but by recognizing patterns, relationships, and landmarks. More importantly, she had to navigate the intricate, high-stakes social web of the tribe. She had to instantly read the non-verbal cues of a crying infant who could not speak. She had to sense subtle shifts in the mood of the group, build alliances, and defuse conflicts before they escalated into violence. A woman who lacked immense social intelligence and deep intuitive empathy would not have been able to keep her children alive in a world where social exclusion meant certain death. Her brain was relentlessly honed to become a master of communication, peripheral awareness, and emotional acuity. Now, imagine the ancestral father. His primary evolutionary role was to venture out into the perilous, featureless expanses to track and hunt mobile prey. The psychological toolkit required for this task is entirely different. A hunter does not need to memorize the color of every leaf. In fact, doing so would be a fatal distraction. He needs singular, laser-like focus. He must be able to mentally rotate objects in three-dimensional space, calculating the trajectory of a spear thrown at a moving target, factoring in distance, speed, and wind. If he chases a herd of antelope for 2 days across a desolate, changing landscape, he cannot navigate by landmarks, because he has never been there before. He must possess an internal compass, an innate sense of orientation and mental geometry that allows him to calculate a straight line back to his camp. The men who lacked this deeply ingrained spatial awareness simply walked out into the wilderness and never came back. They left no ancestors. These ancient demands did not magically vanish when we moved into modern houses and started driving cars. The ghosts of the hunter and the gatherer still echo in the wiring of our brains today. We see it in the way male and female brains are bathed in different hormones before we are even born. In the dark silence of the womb, a developing male brain is steeped in a surge of testosterone, a chemical wash that physically alters the architecture of the neural networks. pruning certain connections and strengthening others. This early hormonal bath primes the mind for spatial manipulation, system building, and competitive focus. The developing female brain, free from this massive testosterone surge, retains a richer, more interconnected network across the two hemispheres, priming the mind for rapid communication, emotional resonance, and contextual memory. This is not a story of superiority or inferiority. It is a story of profound complementary brilliance. The tragedy of modern debate is that we often try to force men and women to be exactly the same, and when we inevitably discover that they are not, we assume one must be defective. But evolution does not build defective tools. The male tendency to systematize the world, to focus singularly on the mechanics of a problem, and the female tendency to empathize, to see the vast web of social and emotional connections, are both spectacular evolutionary triumphs. They are two halves of a survival strategy that allowed our species to conquer the globe. When you sit across from your partner and feel frustrated that they do not see a problem exactly the way you do, you are not experiencing a failure of communication. You are experiencing the beautiful, complex reality of two distinct evolutionary designs operating in real time. We are built to process the world through different lenses. And as we will soon see, these distinct internal architectures not only dictate how we navigate a city or solve a problem, but they also dictate exactly what we look for when we scan a crowded room searching for the one person who holds the key to our biological future. Chapter 8. The Metrics of Attraction. Imagine walking into a crowded, dimly lit social gathering. The room is filled with laughter, the clinking of glasses, and a sea of faces. People are deep in conversation, completely absorbed in their own small worlds. Suddenly, the door opens and someone walks in. Without a single word being spoken, a ripple of attention washes through the room. Heads turn. Conversations pause for just a fraction of a second. You feel an involuntary, almost magnetic pull of attention toward this newcomer. We call this powerful phenomenon beauty. We write epic poems about it. We wage wars over it, and we spend billions of dollars trying to replicate it. But what exactly is happening in that split second of attraction? Is beauty truly just in the eye of the beholder, a fleeting cultural fad that changes with the wind, or is there a deeper, much older mathematics at work? We love to believe that our romantic tastes are entirely unique, subjective, and shaped by the media or the society in which we live. It is comforting to think that our ideals of physical perfection are arbitrary. But the brutal, brilliant truth of evolution tells a different story. Beauty is not a cultural accident. It is a biological dashboard. When you look at someone and feel that sudden rush of desire, your brain is doing a lightning-fast, incredibly complex medical and biological assessment. You are not just appreciating aesthetics. You are reading a genetic resume. Consider the features that human beings universally find beautiful across every culture on the globe. Clear and smooth skin, bright eyes, symmetrical facial features, and thick, lustrous hair. These are not random preferences picked out of a hat. They are the hardest things in the world to fake if you are sick, aging, or suffering from a heavy load of internal parasites. They are nature's unforgeable certificates of health and youth. A young woman with flawless skin and boundless energy is broadcasting her peak reproductive potential. Her beauty is an honest signal, a biological guarantee that she possesses the vitality necessary to bring a child into the world and the genetic immunity to survive the microscopic wars raging inside her body. Let us look at a specific, fascinating metric that operates completely beneath our conscious awareness. For decades, the fashion industry has dictated what the ideal human form should look like, shifting restlessly from the slender, boyish figures of the 1920s to the fuller, curvier figures of the 1950s. Yet, if you look past the superficial, ever-changing trends of weight and clothing, you find a remarkably constant, universal geometry. Across cultures and across time, the most universally desired female physique is one where the waist is significantly narrower than the hips. Why does this specific shape trigger such an intense, hardwired response? In the brutal calculus of our ancestral past, a woman with a narrow waist and wider hips was broadcasting two vital pieces of information to any observing male. First, the ratio is a direct reflection of a specific hormonal balance indicating the presence of estrogen and the onset of peak fertility. Second, and perhaps most crucially, a narrow waist is the absolute undeniable visual proof that she is not currently pregnant with another man's child. A male who was attracted to women who were already pregnant would waste his life raising the genetic legacy of his rivals. Therefore, the male brain is unconsciously reading this geometry and feeling attraction because it signals an open, prime opportunity for reproductive success. The hourglass figure is not an invention of modern media. It is an ancient evolutionary bullseye. But the metrics of attraction are absolutely not a one-way street. When a woman scans that same crowded room, her biological radar is tuned to an entirely different frequency. Because her investment in bringing a child into the world is so monumental, costing her immense physical resources, time, and vulnerability, she cannot afford to be seduced by mere physical health alone. She is not merely looking for youth and fertility, she is looking for an architect of a secure future. When a woman feels drawn to a man, her mind is relentlessly evaluating his ambition, his social standing, his confidence, and his ability to acquire and protect resources. Imagine a woman observing two men at this gathering. One is incredibly handsome, with flawless, symmetrical features, but he slouches in a corner, avoiding eye contact, shrinking away from the crowd, and radiating a profound lack of drive. The other man might have entirely ordinary, even asymmetrical features, but he effortlessly holds the center of the room. He speaks with quiet authority, he makes others laugh, he listens intently, and he exudes an aura of competence and social power. The intense magnetic pull a woman feels toward the second man is not a cultural construct, nor is it gold-digging. It is her ancient evolutionary programming recognizing a partner who possesses the social and practical tools to ensure her children will survive and thrive in a harsh, unpredictable world. In our ancestral environment, a man's social status was the difference between a family eating through a harsh winter or starving in the cold. We are still deeply wired to desire those markers of survival. Ambition, humor, and status are the male equivalents of the hourglass figure. They are the unfakeable indicators that he can navigate the complex hierarchy of the tribe and bring resources back to the hearth. We are captivated by beauty, charisma, and status because they are the vital signs of our evolutionary future. Every lingering glance, every blush, and every sudden racing of the heart is a testament to the brilliant, calculating survival engine operating just beneath our conscious awareness. Our instincts are performing a masterpiece of rapid deduction, ensuring that when we choose to combine our genetic destiny with a stranger, we are making the safest, most promising bet possible. But this physical and social evaluation is only the entry point. Once we lock eyes, once the initial gravitational pull of attraction brings us together, the real game begins. To keep a partner, to deceive a rival, and to navigate the lifelong complexities of love, we must use the most powerful, metabolically expensive weapon in our entire biological arsenal. We must use our minds. Chapter 9. The Social Brain. The human brain is an anatomical luxury. It accounts for a tiny, almost negligible fraction of your total body weight, yet it ruthlessly consumes a massive 20% of your daily energy. It is a biological gas guzzler, an incredibly expensive piece of machinery that demands a constant, heavy stream of calories just to keep its lights on. Evolution is famously frugal, aggressively pruning away any physical trait that wastes energy. So why did nature permit this ravenous, oversized engine to develop inside our skulls? For a very long time, the standard explanation was that we simply needed to be smart to survive the brutal physical world. We love to imagine our distant ancestors needing these massive brains to invent the wheel, discover how to control fire, or craft the perfect hunting spear. But this narrative falls apart under close scrutiny. Creating a sharp rock to cut meat does not require a biological supercomputer. A leopard is an elite, masterful hunter, perfectly adapted to taking down incredibly fast and dangerous prey, and it manages this breathtaking feat with a brain the size of a baseball. If basic physical survival was the only hurdle, our brains should have stopped growing millions of years ago. The physical environment simply does not demand a 3-pound neural galaxy. So, what is this massive engine actually calculating? The answer is that the most complex, unpredictable, and dangerous environment a human being will ever navigate is not the wilderness, it is other human beings. Imagine sitting at a dinner table with a group of close friends and acquaintances. A seemingly innocent conversation is flowing about a recent promotion at work. Suddenly, one person offers a polite, smiling compliment to another. But you, sitting quietly across the table, instantly notice a fleeting micro-expression. You register the incredibly subtle shift in their tone, the quick, calculated glance they shoot toward a third person in the room. In a fraction of a second, without conscious effort, your brain processes a staggering amount of data. You realize the compliment was actually a veiled insult designed to subtly elevate the speaker's status while undermining a rival, all wrapped in a cloak of plausible deniability. You also calculate that the person receiving the compliment is entirely unaware of the trap, and you have to decide in real time whether to intervene, stay silent, or align yourself with the aggressor. That lightning-fast calculation required you to simultaneously simulate the hidden thoughts, motives, and emotional states of 3 different people. It is an act of astonishing computational power, a game of multi-dimensional social chess. This is exactly what your brain was built for. Our ancestors survived by living in tightly knit, highly cooperative bands, but those bands were also seething cauldrons of political maneuvering. To thrive, you had to know who to trust, who was planning to betray you, and who was secretly forming alliances behind your back. If someone evolved a slightly better ability to deceive, their peers had to evolve a slightly better ability to detect deception. It was an internal, runaway arms race. We did not grow large brains to outsmart the weather or outwit the antelope. We grew large brains to outsmart each other. But this relentless Machiavellian competition is only half the story. There is a far more beautiful, romantic reason for our immense intelligence. When we look at the breathtaking, arbitrary beauty of a peacock's magnificent tail, we understand that it evolved as a currency of seduction. The human brain is our peacock's tail. Think about the things that make us uniquely, vibrantly human. We write sweeping, emotional poetry, we compose complex symphonies, we paint masterpieces, and we spend hours engaging in witty, playful banter. Absolutely none of these activities help us gather berries or escape predators. From a purely survivalist perspective, art and humor are a spectacular waste of energy, but from the perspective of the mating game, they are the ultimate display of genetic quality. Imagine a couple on a first date. They are sitting in a coffee shop, leaning in, engaged in a vibrant, fast-paced conversation. One of them tells a spontaneous, deeply clever joke. The other erupts into genuine laughter, immediately countering with a sharp, witty observation of their own. They are not exchanging resumes or discussing their physical health, but on a biological level, they are administering a rigorous, demanding cognitive fitness test. Humor is incredibly difficult to fake. It requires a vast vocabulary, perfect timing, deep empathy to understand exactly what the other person will find amusing, and the neurological speed to connect completely unrelated concepts in real time. A dull, slow, or diseased mind simply cannot be witty. When you dazzle someone with your conversation, you are unfurling a magnificent, glowing neurological ornament. You are proving, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that your DNA is capable of building a flawless, high-speed supercomputer. Our minds were shaped by the relentless, intertwined pressures of seduction and society. Every time you lose yourself in a beautiful piece of music, every time you navigate a tricky social dilemma at work, and every time you make someone you love laugh until they cannot breathe, you are firing up the most extraordinary survival engine ever created. We are the ultimate social apes, driven by an ancient imperative to connect, to charm, and to outwit. And it is this very chess game of the intellect that ultimately defines the richness of the human experience. Chapter 10. The Ultimate Ape. Imagine a fierce, solitary predator roaming the frozen, unforgiving plains of the ancient world. This creature is a master of the wild, driven by raw aggression, territorial dominance, and a brutal instinct for immediate survival. It trusts nothing and cooperates only out of desperate necessity. Now, look at a golden retriever sleeping peacefully at the foot of your bed. This dog is a descendant of that exact same ancient, untamed predator. Yet the dog is wired for profound empathy. It eagerly seeks out eye contact. It whines when you are sad, and its greatest joy comes from cooperative play. How did a creature of pure, isolated aggression transform into a creature of boundless, eager affection? The answer is domestication. When humans began leaving scraps of food near their roaring campfires, only the least aggressive, most tolerant wild canines dared to approach. Over thousands of generations, we selectively permitted the friendly, cooperative animals to stay and breed, while we chased away the aggressive ones. We altered their physical bodies, but more importantly, we completely rewired their psychological nature. We bred the wildness out of them and bred the social grace in. Now, take that exact same concept and turn the mirror upon ourselves. When we look back at the dawn of our own species, we see an animal that had to fight tooth and nail against a brutal physical world. But as we began to form tighter, more complex social bands, a profound shift occurred. We did not have an alien, master species looking down on us, deciding who got to eat and who got to breed. Instead, we did it to ourselves. We became our own domesticators. We are the self-domesticated ape. To truly feel the weight of this, imagine what life was actually like in a deeply ancient, tight-knit hunter-gatherer tribe. This small band of 50 or so people was your entire universe. There were no police to call, no courts to settle disputes, and no other cities to move to if you ruined your reputation. In this environment, your physical strength was far less important than your social standing. If a man was exceptionally strong but prone to uncontrollable violent rages, he was a massive liability to the group. If a woman was brilliant at gathering food but utterly deceitful and selfish, she destroyed the fragile trust that kept the tribe alive. The tribe simply could not afford to tolerate them. Those who could not control their temper, who could not share, who could not read the emotional room, were quietly ostracized. And in the ancient world, being cast out of the social firelight meant absolute, certain death. Therefore, generation after generation, the human race selectively bred itself for social harmony. We rewarded those who were kind, cooperative, and emotionally intelligent with status, protection, and above all, mates. Every time an ancient human chose a partner because they were witty, compassionate, and a good listener, rather than just the biggest brute in the valley, they were actively domesticating the human species. We bred ourselves for love. We pruned away our most antisocial instincts and cultivated a mind that is breathtakingly sensitive to the feelings, judgments, and needs of others. This realization completely shatters the oldest, most tired debate in human history, the battle between nature and culture. We are constantly told that our biological nature is a base, animalistic thing that must be conquered by the high, noble forces of human culture. We imagine culture as a sturdy cage we built to trap our inner beast. But this is entirely backward. Culture is not the opposite of our nature, it is our natural habitat. Just as a fish is biologically designed to thrive in water, we are biologically designed to thrive in culture. Our customs, our art, our moral codes, and our elaborate social rituals are not artificial constructs fighting against our biology. They are the magnificent outward expressions of a biological brain that evolved to connect, to cooperate, and to navigate the complex social webs we built for ourselves. We have spent our time exploring the invisible, relentless treadmill of the evolutionary race. We have seen how we are locked in a perpetual, microscopic war against parasites, forcing us to constantly shuffle our genetic codes. We have seen how the ancient treaty between the sperm and the egg set the stage for the intense, beautiful, and sometimes heartbreaking game of romantic seduction. We have seen how the struggle for mates drove the expansion of our incredible, oversized brains, turning us into masters of wit, art, and social manipulation. But when you pull back the lens and look at the totality of the human experience, you realize that the ultimate rival we have been racing against all this time is ourselves. We challenged ourselves to become smarter, kinder, and more deeply connected. We are the product of millions of years of survivors who won their races not just by outrunning the predators in the dark, but by moving toward the light of the campfire. We survived by holding each other close, by evaluating the true character of our partners, and by raising our children in webs of fierce, protective love. You are the inheritor of that magnificent legacy. Every time you feel the magnetic pull of attraction, every time you laugh with a friend, and every time you sacrifice your own comfort for the sake of someone you love, you are not transcending your biology. You are fulfilling it in the most beautiful way possible. You are acting out the grand, triumphant design of a species that took the chaotic, brutal forces of evolution and used them to forge the human heart.